probably if there's one communication strategy, just one, that's the only one you do, that could move things forward, it's one that you've already probably mulled over, maybe you read books about, maybe you've taught, maybe you encourage others, and it's the idea of listening better. If you imagine somebody you know right now who, like, literally visualize this person, who's a really terrible listener. I mean, when you talk, they don't pay attention. And maybe they're on their phone, or maybe they're interrupting or whatever, but they're not listening. And then if you imagine another person who's a really great listener, and you talk to them, they're dialed in. And you can tell they care about what you have to say. They might not agree, but they take you to, visualize that person who really wants to hear what you have to say. If you think about those two people, odds are you have a much higher opinion of the one who listens than the one who doesn't listen. Regardless of what their skills are, what their gifts are, who they are as people, what their roles, responsibilities are, you probably have a higher opinion of a listener than a non-listener. And if we're going to talk about building bridges and connecting and learning from one another, probably listening is critical. I can't have a conversation unless I know what the other person has to say. When we were writing Better Conversations and I was doing the research, people around the world, 9 different countries, filled in 1,000 forms about their experiences listening, and a lot of them talked about communicating, and a lot of them talked about listening, and a lot of them said there's room for improvement. I'm not the listener I need to be. In fact, it was the most common comment people made is, I'm not the listener I need to be. So here are just a couple thoughts. The first one is, I don't think it has to be some really significant technique. We don't have to worry about paraphrasing the right way and the right kind of eye contact and the right kind of questions and aligning our body language. I'm sure there are levels of listening, and there's a level in which sophisticated skills could help us move forward. But the most important thing is that I genuinely want to hear what the other person has to say. I go into the conversation genuinely trying to hear, committed to hearing what they have to say. There is one strategy I want to share, though, that I think is helpful. And that's this one by Irving Seidman in this book called Interviewing as Qualitative Research. Now, I didn't think when I heard about this book that I would like it as much as I did. Someone at a workshop came up to me and said, you really should read this book about interviewing. And so I went, all right, I'll get it on Amazon and see what happens. But I did find it to be an extremely helpful book, and here's a simple little strategy that might be helpful for you. What Seidman says is when we listen to other people, we have to pay attention to the public voice and the private voice. The public voice is what someone says that's going to be publicly acceptable. The private voice is what's really going on. So let's take for an example. If I ask a brand new teacher, she's been teaching for 2 months, how's it going? What are you thinking about teaching? The public voice might be something like, oh, it's been interesting. Which really doesn't reveal a whole lot about what the person's doing, but they've answered the question and they're not dishonest. They've given an honest answer. But the private voice is, I cry 3 nights a week when I drive home. I'm afraid I made the wrong choice. I'm not sure I'm made out to be a teacher. So when we listen, one way of going deeper is to ask ourselves, am I hearing the public voice or the private voice? And by paying attention, am I caring, am I being curious, I think we can move towards a better understanding of the private voice. Even if we don't use that strategy, though, if we want to understand people who are different than us, it's going to start with listening. It's going to start with turning our eyes towards them and hearing what they have to say.